issues that were very important to Rav Kahana. Our first speaker, who already spoke in Hebrew, is going to speak to us about Rabbi Kahana's prediction of the 40-year period and the meaning it has. Is this the last year of the 40-year period, of the final 40-year period, before God redeems us or destroys Am Yisrael? I'm sure you all want to know the answer to that question. You'll get an answer soon. Our speaker is a longtime activist, and he's a supporter of Rav Kahana. He's held many leadership positions in both Kach and Kahana Chai. He's the editor of the monthly magazine Voice of Judea, and he's also the gentleman who organized tonight's event. Please welcome Mike Guzovsky, also known as Yekutiel Ben Yaakov.
First, I want to apologize for the temperature in the room at the beginning of the tonight's program. Thank God it's cooling off a bit in here. The other folks that are in the video conferencing room, I want to welcome everyone in this room, as well as in the video conferencing room, and the thousands of people who will be and who are viewing this event on the internet, as well as in the events that are scheduled in New York and in Europe in the coming weeks. Arut Sheva as well, I want to welcome you and the Jerusalem Post or whoever else is here tonight. We did not come here tonight, or let us say that I did not organize this evening tonight to come and to have a conventional morning ceremony, askara if you will, in the traditional sense for Rabbi Meir Kahana, Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh Livracha, Hashem Yikom Damo. Rabbi Kahana would say, we Jews of the Jewish idea are not mere practitioners of ritual. And so the reason why I organized this event tonight is specifically not to be an askara that we are accustomed to, where we come and cry and show how sad we are that Rabbi Kahana is no longer with us, and babble about if only Rabbi Kahana was here and how much we miss him and how right Rabbi Kahana was. That's not why I organized the event today. There are other events, Baruch Hashem, that are organized to come and to mourn and to speak about how right he was and how lost we are without him. But that's not the purpose for tonight's event. Rabbi Kahana would have expected more from us, because I always remember Rabbi Kahana saying that I don't want more yurtzites and more plaques and more kadishes and more memorial candles. I want to stop Jews from being murdered. I want to save Israel. I want to save the Jewish people. Time is running out. That's the Rabbi Kahana that I remember. Rabbi Kahana would say, stop crying and get up and do something. Spread the message. Do what you can on whatever level you're prepared to commit yourself and are capable of doing. That's the Rabbi Kahana I remember. That's the Rabbi Kahana that I miss for 16 years. Because I am sick and tired of coming year in and year out for the same dry, conventional ritual where we come, cry, go home, and come back the next year and babble the same truths that we babbled the year before. That's not what Rabbi Kahana was about. That's not what he taught us. That's not what he would have expected from us. God willing, tonight, in the 15 or 20 minutes that I will be addressing you and the other speakers tonight, Shifra, who will be speaking on the subject of Aliyah, and Dina on the subject of the prisoners, and Baruch Ben Yosef, God willing, tonight, you will leave this event with a living tribute to Rabbi Meir Kahana, with a commitment with an understanding about programs that each and every one of us can get involved in at some level to make our small contribution in bringing to life Rabbi Kahana's programs and ideas. Because these are the only programs, make no mistake, these are the only programs that can save Israel today. And so I did not come here tonight to speak about how right Rabbi Kahana was. It's obvious, everybody knows it, the left, the right, the religious, the secular. Anyone who's involved in Israeli politics knows how right Rabbi Kahana was in his analysis of the problems that endanger and confront the state of Israel today. When he brought these issues up 20 years ago and 30 years ago, he was considered a Meshuggah. He was considered insane. He was called a racist. He was maligned. He was slandered for even bringing up and addressing and outlining and articulating and defining the problems that endangered Israel then and that would endanger Israel today. And naturally he was right. He was right about the Arab demographic threat. He was right about the corruption in Israel. He was right about the education system in Israel. He was right about the threat of Iran. Yes, he even wrote about the threat of Iran. He was right about the road of destruction when we place our faith in the Gentiles and in the nations of the world, and how we need to disregard international opinion and to do that which God has commanded us to do if we want to save Israel. But as I mentioned earlier, we came here today to discuss a program. Because if Rabbi Kahana was right in his analysis of defining the problem, and as if it's now popular and acceptable to say that, then let us also talk about the solution to the problem and how right Rabbi Kahana was in defining and in offering a program of survival, a blueprint of survival for the Jewish people. We didn't come here to say the obvious. We came here to say the things that are still difficult to say. It's no longer difficult to cry and say Rabbi Kahana was right. It is difficult to get up and to do something to try and implement his programs to save Israel. And that's our job. I want to start with Rabbi Kahana's predictions and book of 40 years. Rabbi Kahana taught us in this little book, big book, 40 years. This is a book that we need to read and reread and buy and distribute to every Jew in the world. This is a great book because his predictions and his sources and his program of survival are so right. In this book, Rabbi Kahana teaches us that the number 40 in Judaism, in Chazal, in the Talmud, in the Bible, in Jewish history, has significance. The number 40 has significance when we're talking about reward and punishment for our sins, for our deeds. 40 lashes, punishment. 40 years in the wilderness for the Jewish people after the spies came back and spoke their words of lack of faith. They were not capable of conquering the land, they thought, they said. Their lack of faith then and their fear of the Gentiles brought upon us 40 years in the wilderness. We just read Parshat Noach. 40 days and 40 nights of a Mabul. The Mabul, the flood that destroyed mankind other than the house of Noach. The world was destroyed as we knew it, other than the house of Noah, because of their sins. The punishment, 40 days and 40 nights. So 40 in reference to punishment and reward. And Rabbi Kahana draws, in this book, brings the sources to the number 40 in reference to repentance. The mikvah, the ritual bath, the purity, comes after going into 40 se'ah of water, a measurement of 40 of water. That's when the Jew can accomplish purification. We also see that 40 is brought down, and Rabbi Kahana brings this in his book 40 Years. 40 is brought down in reference to a grace period that God gives the Jewish people to return and to do tshuva before the Holocaust, before the disaster, before the catastrophe. There is a 40-year grace period that is given to the Jew. And we see this was the case in the first temple before it was destroyed. There was a window of opportunity, a last window of opportunity God in His infinite mercy gave to the Jewish people, where they could have averted tragedy, they could have prevented the Gzeira, they could have prevented the decree, they could have prevented the Churban and the destruction of the temple. And Rabbi Kahana brings the sources from the Talmud and from the Tanakh. There was a 40-year window of opportunity, a last 40 years, before the destruction of the first temple and before the destruction of the second temple. And so was the case with the city of Nineveh in Yonah. 40 days to repent. There is also a concept of 40 when we speak of a period to decide one's destiny. When something new comes to the world, when something great comes to the world, when something momentous happens, when a special gift is given to us by God, there is 40, the number 40 comes into play, where we can decide the fate, where we can make the choice between life and death, where we can make the choice between destruction and survival, where we can decide our own destiny between redemption and between exile. Or, if you will, between a redemption of bi'ita that comes in its time through great tragedy, because everybody knows the redemption is going to come. Everybody knows Mashiach is going to come. The question is, what happens in the meantime, and how that redemption comes about. Will it come about bi'ita in its time through tragedy, after tragedy, through needless bloodshed? Or will it come about through the sanctification of God's name, through faith in God, through miracles? And that's up to us. If we do tshuva, or if we don't do tshuva. And we see that there's a 40, this number 40, in deciding your destiny. A child. The first 40 days in the mother's womb, you can pray that it should be a boy or that it should be a girl. But after 40 days, it's a bracha levatala. It's heresy. It's already decided on the 40th day. 40 days, the spies went into the land of Israel. Rabbi Kahana writes in his book, Vayashuvu mitor haaretz miketz arba'im yom. They had 40 days, the spies. They can go to Israel and say, we can do it. If we follow God's commandments, we can conquer the land. We need not regard the Gentiles. We can overcome them. But instead, they decided their fate in the 40 days of their touring of Israel. And they decided their destiny that would be 40 years of wilderness, of exile. Mashiach could have come then. Scuds, Kachushas, Kassams, Shimon Peres, we never would have known about any of those things. Mashiach would have been there then. It would have been the final and complete redemption of the Jewish people. But in that period of 40 days, they failed. They decided their destiny and the destiny of the Jewish people to be exile after exile until the eventual and final redemption. Rabbi Kahana writes in his book about 1948, when the state of Israel was created. And he said that it is logical to apply this theory to this great gift of the state of Israel returning home after thousands of years of exile. From the decay and from the ashes of Auschwitz, we returned home. Miracle of miracles. After thousands of years of exile. And he said if there's a 40-year period, then surely there should be a 40-year period where we will need to decide our destiny and decide our fate. And recently I was speaking to people and they said, you're making a conference and you're discussing 40 years, you're an idiot. 40 years came and passed, Mike, Yekutiel. 1948, 1988, nothing happened. Rabbi Kahana warned about a Holocaust in America, nothing happened. And it's not true. nothing happened in 1988? In 1988, Israel did not decide its fate, and we are not suffering, and we have not suffered so much, so many losses, so much bloodshed because of that decision from 1988 until now. In 1988, they declared Kach to be an outlawed organization that could not run for Knesset because Rabbi Kahana quoted Judaism and he quoted Torah. That is not deciding the fate and the course of the nation. The Torah was effectively banned in the state of Israel in 1988. 40 years after the state of Israel was created, Rabbi Kahana was right. In 1988, the Intifada was born. The Islamic terrorism that threatens the world today can trace its roots back to the movement that was formed on and around 1988 with the first Intifada. Today, we are in the 40th year from the time that we liberated the Temple Mount, the most momentous occasion in Jewish history since the destruction of the Temple. We returned to Judea and to Samaria and to Gaza, to Rachel's tomb, and tonight, as we enter the 41st day of the year, on Yud Aleph Cheshvan, the yurtzeit of Rachel Imenu, we return to Rachel's tomb, and we return to the tombs of the patriarchs and the matriarchs in Hebron, and we return to Kever Yosef, Joseph's tomb in Shechem, all of the biblical cities, and we return to the Temple Mount, the famous cry, Har Habayit biyadenu, Har Habayit is in our hands. Obviously, 40 years from that time, there needs to be a decision made. Only for so long can good and evil coexist, can redemption and exile coexist. There's no eternal coexistence between Arabs and Jews, between good and evil, between holiness and purity and impurity. There is a time when you have to decide. You can live together with evil for X amount of time, but at some point it comes to an end. And we've reached that critical crossroads in Jewish history where we can no longer play sanctifying God's name and desecrating Him at the same time. Having faith and not having faith. Playing the game that every Jewish leader has played in this country ever since the state was created. It doesn't matter whether they're Likud or Labor or Lieberman or Mavdal or whoever. It's all the same game of let's do the best that we can within the framework of living among the nations. No one ever had the guts to say no to the world, no to the United Nations, no to Washington, to disregard world opinion and to do that which we need to do to survive and that which God commands us to do. No one ever in this country, no leader, ever said we will follow the path of the Torah in spite of what the world says and in spite of the threat of international sanctions. Bibi Netanyahu, a nation among nations. You can't run a modern society based on the Bible, he tells us. And so one is a little more right, one is a little more left, one gives away land quicker, one does it slower. But in the end, they're all playing the game, the balance of coexistence between satisfying world opinion and doing that which we need to do to survive and that which God has commanded us to do. But we can't play that game anymore in the year 40 since the liberation of the Temple Mount. Things have changed. There's something new in the air. We've reached a critical point in history where we need to decide. Will it be faith in God? Or will it be faith in the international community and inviting France and Germany to protect Lebanon until that explodes into Gog and Magog? Will we initiate the actions we need to take, or will it be forced upon us by the international community and by the Gentiles because we were frightened to do that which we could have done and should have done? (1967) versus 1948. In 48, we were given a license from the nations to come home to Israel. In 67, we initiated a war. We fought, and with the help of God, with great miracles, we succeeded and we won. In fact, that was the last war that we won. Have you ever asked yourself, what was the last war that Israel won? When was it? 39 years ago plus. Because ever since the Six-Day War, there has been no decisive victory by the State of Israel, by the army of Israel, by the people of Israel in the land of Israel. And the last war is the worst of all of them. Why do I say that this year is the critical year? Look around you. It is astonishing. It is mind-boggling if we address what is happening around us. No army could succeed and no state can survive without morale, without ruach, without faith. The Israeli society has never had less morale. The IDF has never had less morale than today. We have entered into an unprecedented period from June 2006. June 2006, we celebrated the 39th anniversary from the liberation of the Temple Mount, and we have entered in to an unprecedented and unparalleled period in Jewish history as of June of this year, starting with the kidnapping of so many soldiers and civilians from the north to the south to the Shomron. There has never been greater danger to every major population center in Israel as there is today. Not even in 1948. The Hezbollah, this ragtag terrorist outfit in Lebanon, they can effectively reach every city in Israel, and don't believe Ehud Olmert. They've reached already beyond Beit Shan and beyond Haifa. They can reach Tel Aviv too. And from northern Shomron they can reach Tel Aviv as well. And from Gaza, they can reach Ashkelon and beyond. This is unprecedented, this danger that confronts every Jew in Israel today. There is a country, a member state in the United Nations known as Iran. Iran stands up. They are more bold. Ahmadinejad is more bold than Hitler was in speaking openly about his plans to destroy the Jewish people, to destroy the state of Israel that has no right to exist. Hitler was never this open before he had the capabilities of beginning the mass murder of Jews. He was never this open. We have entered into an unprecedented, unparalleled period in our history where we need to decide. We can no longer sit on both sides of the fence. Either we make a preemptive strike against Iran, or they destroy us. There's no more time to play with the international community, to play the game of, well, not upsetting the international community and not going too far on the one hand. Never this open. We have entered into an unprecedented, unparalleled period in our history where we need to decide. We can no longer sit on both sides of the fence. Either we make a preemptive strike against Iran, or they destroy us. There's no more time to play with the international community, to play the game of, well, not upsetting the international community and not going too far on the one hand, and on the other hand, doing that which we could do. There's no time left for that. It's now or never in this question that affects Israel's very survival. And anybody that has eyes can see that. And it's the same issue with the Hezbollah, and it's the same issue with the Egyptian border. Over the last week, they found 13 tunnels. There is no way to resolve the Qassams falling on Ashkelon and Sderot unless if you go into Gaza, liberate Gaza, conquer Gaza, and create a security zone on both sides of the Philadelphia Tzir. There is no other solution. Either you have faith in God, disregard world opinion, do that what you have to do, or Qassams will fall daily on Sderot until they fall daily on Tel Aviv. Last week there was news items about the international troops that Israel begged to come to Lebanon. We begged the French to lead the international peacekeeping force in Lebanon. And the Germans, and the French, and the Indonesians, God knows who else there. And the French already, they've been very, very clear. We plan on shooting down Israeli planes if you continue to fly over Lebanon. And we need to fly over Lebanon if we want to catch the smuggling of rockets into Lebanon. We have invited upon ourselves the war of Gog and Magog. We're going to reach that point regardless. Somebody's going to press the button. I mean, Israel almost sunk a German ship last week. And there was again a confrontation with the helicopter several days ago. It's a question of time before, regardless, somebody will press the button that will create the explosion that will bring the world against Israel regardless. The question is whether we do that which we need to do and initiate that which we need to do based on what God has commanded us to do and what any normal nation would anyhow do to survive, or whether it comes upon us from a position of weakness and Chil Hashem through tragedy after tragedy, through withdrawal and surrender after surrender. Everything is coming together this year, on this 40th year, since the liberation of the Temple Mount. Before Rosh Hashanah, at the General Assembly of the United Nations, King Abdullah of Jordan, what they call Jordan, he said that there are 6 months left to force Israel to make peace. Because after 6 months, there'll be some sort of a apocalyptic situation that will be out of control, that will affect everybody around the world. He said, this is our year to decide. Before Pesach, Omer said that we have a year and a half left to decide the destiny and the fate of Israel by deciding the fate of Judea and Samaria. What needs to be done on a national level? How can we do this tshuva to yet avert this korban and this tragedy and this needless bloodshed? How does one show his faith in God? What is the barometer of faith? What you're prepared to do to manifest that faith. We say we have faith in God, but what can you do? We can't do this. We can't throw the Arabs out of Israel because you can't do that. What will the world do? Say sanctions, America, United Nations, England. We can't do that. We can't liberate the Temple Mount and purify the Temple Mount and build the temple on the Temple Mount, because there'll be World War III, and what will the Arabs do, and what will the world say? We can't strike at Iran because America is trying to get a coalition to make some sort of sanctions. They're working on a deal with China and Russia where they're softening the sanctions, and we can't take action on our own. What will the Americans say? What will the Americans do? What about our financial aid from America? We can't liberate the Egyptian border, both sides of the Tzir of Philadelphia. The Egyptians already said they'll send 5,000 troops there. There'll be a war. Now we have peace with Egypt. And so they peacefully smuggle weapons of destruction across the border to kill Jews. We can't annex Lebanon or even Judea and Samaria, because what will the world say? This is the year where we need to decide our destiny. It sounds pretty bleak. I mean, what are we going to do? It's all closing in on us this year. Holocaust is coming. We, the Jews who understand, are like the handful of Jews, the minority of the minority, that saw the Holocaust coming in Europe. And we sit here, and we didn't come to mourn Rabbi Kahana and say how right he was, and mourn the destruction that we've all seen and are experiencing. We came to talk about the future today, and it doesn't look good. What can we do about it? Let me tell you something. It's easy to go home and to say, Rabbi Kahana was right, there's nothing we can do about it, the Holocaust is coming. We're the smart ones, like the few Jews that were smart enough to see it coming in Europe before the Holocaust. That won't quite cut it, because I don't want to see a Holocaust. I don't want to be killed in a Holocaust. I don't want my children to be killed in a Holocaust, and I don't want the rest of the people of Israel to die in a Holocaust. And as long as we're breathing and we have the strength to speak about it and to try and do something, it is our obligation. And let me tell you something, there is more hope today than there has been in thousands of years. The Jewish people have never been as united as they are in the right direction and in calling for the right actions on the part of their leaders as we are today. True, it is the blind who are leading, but they are not leading the blind. Not anymore. There's something new in the air as of June in this 40th year. We've upped the antes. We've got to decide. But there's also hope, and greater hope than ever before. We went with the Dov Shurin to the hospital in Tzfat during the war. And we went from soldier to soldier and from person to person in the north. And everybody had the same thing to say. They all sounded more Kahana than Rabbi Kahana. We need to go into Lebanon. We need to finish the work. We could have finished the work. The government is corrupt. They were hesitant. Because of them, we lost the war. They spoke about corrupt morality. The average Jew on the street today in Israel, for the first time in thousands of years, is saying that we need to change the false morality, purity of arms, what they call, of the Israeli political system that was handed down to the soldiers, that favors the lives of enemy population that harbors terrorists, that favors their lives over the lives of our soldiers. The average Israeli knows that it's wrong and has spoken out against it. And all the surveys have shown that. I remember 1981, 1982, during the first invasion of Lebanon. I remember the average Jew on the street had the exact opposite opinion. Something has changed. We got hit with a very heavy hammer on the head, and people are waking up. The average Israeli on the street thinks that their leader should be impeached. Something has changed. People have lost faith in the political system. They've lost faith in the leader of the army and the leader of the country. How do we translate this hope, this new national feeling, this correct direction, this true, authentic, and righteous pain of the nation? How do we direct that towards creating a Jewish state that will have faith in God and disregard the Goyim and international opinion? How do we, that's where it's heading towards. That's what the people mean with their outcry. That's what they're basically openly saying. But how do we translate that into a change of policy, into a real revolutionary change in the policies of the State of Israel that will represent faith in God? That's the question. And for that, Rabbi Kahana also offered an answer. He was not only right about his analysis of the problem, he was not only right about the solution to the problem, faith in God and disregarding the nations and showing your faith in God to do national tshuva, to bring redemption. He was also right about a program of action that could bring about the uprising of the Jewish people and the direction of the Jewish people in the Torah direction, in the direction of the only alternative that can save Israel. And he spoke about a national referendum, and he wrote a book, Revolution or Referendum. Of course, he preferred referendum to revolution. And people thought he was crazy then when he raised this idea. And now we see the brilliance, how the man was a genius. He was a Talmud Chacham, he was a scholar, he had a keen insight in politics and in current events, and in history, and in law, and in activism. He was brilliant. What can be a stronger platform than challenging the government and saying, you don't represent the people of Israel, we do? What could be a stronger challenge? He can't run for Knesset because there can be no party that will openly embrace the views of Rabbi Kahana that runs for Knesset, or they'll be considered racist and outlawed and banned and arrested. But you can raise that platform through a referendum. You can say that these Torah views represent the views of the Jewish people and the interests of the Jewish people more than the policies of the government that everyone anyhow has lost faith in. Today, the Miluimnikim, the headline of their campaign is, let's make a People's Commission of Inquiry. They're not even calling it a National Commission of Inquiry. A People's Commission of Inquiry. Let the people decide. People are already saying this. What Rabbi Kahana was saying then. They're already saying this. They're already saying the very views and the very things that pain the people, and their solutions are almost identical to the solutions proposed by Rabbi Kahana. But unfortunately, the soldiers have been kidnapped, and the Miluimnikim and their campaign have been hijacked by Ehud Olmert, who already made a commission of inquiry, a fake commission of inquiry. Who's on the commission of inquiry? Judges, elitists. They're going to investigate what was the root of the failure of the Lebanon War. They were the root of the failure of the Lebanon War. What are they going to question themselves, indict themselves? Who, if not the judges and the politicians and the very elitists that are sitting on that commission of inquiry, who, if not they, brought about the corrupt morality that favors the enemy population over Jewish soldiers? Who, if not them? They canceled Tiltulim. You're not allowed to shake terrorists, heaven forbid. You're not allowed to do Nohel Shachen, to go and knock on the door and send in an Arab neighbor to the terrorists. You have to risk a Jewish soldier. It was the Bagatz. It was the Israeli courts. Who, if not them, banned Torah in Israel, and banned Rabbi Kahana in Israel, and banned anything Jewish in Israel? They're going to investigate the roots of the Lebanon problem. They are the roots of the Lebanon problem. And so what I want to offer today, and I'll close with this, I'm going to offer today a program, Rabbi Kahana's program. He was not an idiot, and he was not wrong. His idea for a referendum is more ripe now than ever. More ripe now than ever. The people are already screaming basically what needs to be said. And they want to impeach the government, and they know that the government has failed, and the corruption has never reached to higher levels. The president, the prime minister, the justice minister, the former justice minister, the former prime minister. The symbol of Israel has already been destroyed, the presidency. We need to go out and we need to campaign for a referendum with the very, very points that are mentioned here. Do you prefer exiling the Jews from their homes in Judea and Samaria and throwing the Jews out and bringing the Arabs effectively closer to major cities in Israel? Or do you prefer throwing the Arabs out of Israel? I'm on trial for asking that question and for floating that referendum that over 100,000 people voted in before we left Gush Katif. With more cooperation, maybe we could have gotten 1 million or 2 million people. You want soldiers to disobey orders? It's the people's army. Who serves in the army? Your next-door neighbor in Katamon and Petah Tikva? It is the people's nation. And if the soldier is convinced that 3 million Israelis or 2 million Israelis think that it is treason to give away land and to surrender those lands to terrorists, then it will be that much easier for people to take the next step or for the soldier to disobey orders. There can be no greater challenge and no greater platform to articulate Rabbi Kahana's views than through a referendum today. The Miluimnikim are saying, let the people decide through a commission, let's direct them, and let's call for an emergency national referendum that has the legal teeth to decide who will be judges, to decide whether or not we should annex Judea and Samaria and Lebanon, whether or not we should finish off the Hezbollah once and for all, whether or not we should annex both sides of Tzir Philadelphia, whether or not we should take a preemptive strike against Iran. And let's float and articulate our position. This is our opportunity, our golden opportunity on this 40th year to spread Rabbi Kahana's teachings and to mobilize the largest group of people behind those views. Because there's nothing simpler than filling out a ballot with a pen. You don't have to come and get arrested. That I'll get arrested, and I'm on trial for floating the initial referendum. But the guy that signs it, the 1 million people that sign it, are not going to be arrested. And once a person does a mitzvah, there'll be another step afterwards, and another step. For the first time, they're articulating their position, and they're taking a step. It's a small thing that we can do on this day. So I call upon everyone here to get involved. Come to the events, spread our literature. We are the biggest group in Israel today. It doesn't look like that when you look at this room and the conference video room that's here. It looks like a few hundred people came out today. Don't kid yourself. We are the biggest group in Israel. Not just our views, as I mentioned earlier, the consensus, the majority for transfer, and the other issues. We are the biggest group. There is no group in Israel, no group in the world that has 1,000 foot soldiers throughout the country that distribute Rabbi Kahana's literature, the Kachi Darka Shel Torah, the Voice of Judea magazine, in Hebrew and in English and God willing in other languages, that do it with a passion like Those of you that are sitting in this room here today. We don't have the budget to send out. There are people that are ordering 1,000 newsletters a week, and we send them 5 and 10 and 20 and 50 what we can afford to send them. People want to kill me here. I have to run away from here when I'm done because people are upset they're not getting 1,000 and 500 and 600. There are people in this room that go to shul after shul in Haifa and in their neighborhood and in Nahariya and in Beersheba, and then they recycle it and go to another synagogue and pass it out because we believe in what we believe passionately, because we want to save the Jewish people from tragedy. Because we know Rabbi Kahana was right, and we know we have a blueprint of survival for the Jewish people, and it would be criminal for us, knowing that, to sit idly by and not to spread the word, and not to do everything in our power to spread Rabbi Kahana's message. I want to close by just reading to you one verse from the Torah. Vayashuvu mitor haaretz miketz arba'im yom. And the spies that were sent to Israel came back after 40 days, and they spoke lashon hara. They spoke lack of faith. They decided and sealed the fate of the Jewish people to go into exile and to suffer 40 years in the wilderness. It is our obligation to decide our fate on this 40th year, from the time we liberated the Temple Mount and Judea and Samaria. But let it not be sealing the book of death and of exile and of future tragedy. Let it be sealing the book of hope and life. And we have the power, Be'ezrat Hashem, to make a great impact in the land of Israel on this 16th year since Rabbi Kahana was murdered. Thank you.